It was almost a year ago, but the memory of that Christmas party still lingers in my mind. The event was held at Charlotte's office, a sleek high-rise downtown that always felt like another world compared to the quiet life we built together at home. I remember the way the place was transformed that night, the normally sterile conference rooms decked out with garlands, twinkling fairy lights, and tables overflowing with catered food. A jazz quartet played softly in the background, their melodies weaving through the hum of conversation and clinking glasses. Charlotte was in her element. She looked stunning in a dark green dress, her hair cascading in soft waves over her shoulders. As the marketing director for one of the city's most successful firms, she commanded attention, not just for her looks, but for her poise and confidence. Watching her that night, I couldn't help but feel proud. 7 years together, 6 of those as husband and wife, and I still couldn't believe she was mine. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I thought it was solid. Sure, we had our arguments like anyone else. And yes, her career kept her busy, sometimes too busy, but we'd always made it work. I told myself that love, trust, and a little patience could weather anything. At least I used to believe that. That night, though, something shifted. Steve. That was the name that stuck with me. He was her boss, and Charlotte had mentioned him often over the past year. Too often, if I'm being honest. Steve had this brilliant idea, or Steve loved my presentation. At first, I chalked it up to her admiration for someone successful in her field, but the frequency of his name in our conversations had started to gnaw at me, a quiet unease I couldn't quite shake. I met him for the first time at the party. He was everything I expected, tall, polished, and effortlessly charismatic. He greeted me warmly, shaking my hand firmly as Charlotte stood beside him, her laugh just a touch louder than usual. I watched the way they interacted, how his gaze lingered on her just a little too long, how her smile seemed brighter when she spoke to him. I told myself I was imagining things. Paranoia, I thought. Still, I couldn't ignore the way my stomach tightened when I saw them together. The party went on, and I tried to relax, nursing a glass of whiskey as I mingled with her colleagues. But I couldn't help but glance toward Charlotte every so often. She was always in the thick of things, laughing, talking, commanding attention. She looked happy, genuinely happy, and yet I felt like an outsider in her world. The irony stung. Charlotte had begged me to come to this event, insisting it was important for her career. It's mandatory, she'd said weeks ago with her disarming smile. Steve wants all the senior partners and their spouses there. You'll charm everyone like you always do, I promise. Back then, her excitement was contagious. Tonight, though, it felt like I was a prop in a play where everyone else knew their lines except me. I sipped my watered-down whiskey and scanned the room, the laughter and clinking glasses barely registering. It was a far cry from the quieter evenings Charlotte and I used to spend dreaming about the future. We had planned to start trying for a baby next year. She wanted to wait, citing her career's meteoric rise as a reason to hold off. I'd agreed, though her hesitation had stung. Lately, it seemed her job was her real love. Her world revolved around Steve, her boss, and her increasingly frequent late nights. The sound of laughter pulled me back to the present. I was talking to one of Charlotte's colleagues, a junior associate who was all too eager to make small talk. I noticed his eyes dart to something, or someone, behind me. When I turned, Charlotte was the focal point of a group, laughing effortlessly at something Steve had said. Her hand rested lightly on his arm as he leaned in to whisper something. "Your wife's quite the star here," the junior associate remarked. There was sympathy in his tone that I didn't understand until I caught the sidelong glances from others in the room. A few smiled at me politely, but the expressions of others held something closer to pity. It wasn't long before I realized I hadn't seen Charlotte for a while. My eyes instinctively sought her out, scanning the clusters of partygoers, but she was nowhere to be found. The last place I'd seen her was near the bar with Steve. I wandered over to the spot, my chest tightening. She wasn't there, Steve wasn't either. I approached one of her coworkers, someone I vaguely recognized from a dinner months ago. "Have you seen Charlotte?" Her coworker hesitated, then glanced towards the staircase. "She went upstairs a while ago." I think Steve went up, too. He's got an office on the next floor. A chill ran through me as I processed the words. Upstairs. Together. I thanked the coworker and forced myself to stay composed as I made my way to the stairs. My mind raced, grasping for innocent explanations, but my gut churned with unease. Whatever I was about to find at the top of those stairs, I knew one thing for certain. My life was about to change. The hallway stretched before me like a gauntlet, dimly lit and eerily quiet compared to the lively din of the party below. My steps faltered as I passed door after door, each one looking identical. Anxiety clawed at me, my chest tightening with every wrong turn. Where is it? Steve's office. But where? Finally, a faint sound reached my ears. A muffled thump, followed by what could only be described as laughter mixed with something else. My stomach twisted. I followed the noise, each step pulling me closer to a door at the end of the hallway. As I approached, the sounds grew clearer, a mix of gasps and murmurs barely contained by the wood between us. The voices were unmistakable, Charlotte's melodic laughter tinged with something far more intimate and a deeper, rougher tone that had to belong to Steve. I stopped just short of the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. My hand trembled as I pulled out my phone and activated the camera. If I was wrong, I'd apologize later, but if I was right, I didn't want to think about it. I needed proof, evidence, something to hold on to in the wreckage of whatever was on the other side. Heart racing, I tried the doorknob. Locked. My breath came in short bursts, the frustration and dread rising in equal measure. A sane man might have walked away, but I wasn't sane. Not anymore. The door opened inward. I could tell by the position of the hinges. Without giving myself a chance to second guess, I braced myself, shifted my weight, and drove my shoulder into the door. The impact jolted through me, but the lock was cheap, no match for the momentum of my desperation. The door flew open, slamming against the wall, revealing the scene inside. Charlotte and Steve froze, like deer caught in the headlights of a very angry truck. They were a mess of tangled limbs and misplaced clothing, a tableau of guilt so absurd it would have been comical if it hadn't been my life. Charlotte's blouse hung half off her shoulder like it had been attacked by a confused octopus, while Steve's tie was wrapped around his head like a crown, his shirt undone in a way that seemed more chaotic than seductive. The desk behind them was an avalanche of papers and overturned coffee cups, bearing witness to their lack of professionalism in more ways than one. For a moment, none of us moved. Charlotte's eyes widened in pure horror, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Steve, pale as a ghost, made a weak attempt to pull himself together, failing miserably as his pants betrayed him, sagging like a poorly anchored tent. I can explain, Charlotte stammered, clutching at her blouse in a futile attempt at decency. Steve, meanwhile, raised a hand as though I was a waiter and he was about to order a latte. Look, man, this isn't what it... I cut him off with a laugh that surprised even me. It was a hollow, bitter sound that echoed in the room. Oh, please, I said, holding up my phone, the camera still rolling. By all means, explain. Their expressions shifted, panic, shame and indignation all warring for dominance. Before you find out what happens next, please subscribe to the channel. My eyes darted between them, my breathing shallow as the weight of the scene pressed down on me. I lowered my phone and slid it into my pocket, the camera still recording. The proof I'd captured was more than enough. Charlotte and Steve had been caught red-handed, and there was no talking their way out of it. But even as the phone disappeared from view, the simmering rage in my chest demanded more than quiet documentation. My voice came out low, trembling with barely restrained anger. So this is what I've been dragged here for? A front row seat to my own humiliation? Matthew, please, you don't understand. Charlotte started, her tone desperate and shaky. Oh, I understand perfectly. I snapped, my voice rising. I understand that the woman I've spent the last 8 years of my life with, the woman I've loved, trusted and planned a future with, has been sneaking around with her boss, and for what? Was this some kind of sick game? Did you invite me here to publicly humiliate me? Or was that just a bonus? Charlotte's lips moved, but no words came out. Her face twisted into an expression I'd never seen before, equal parts shame and panic. She finally stammered, It's not what it looks like." I let out a humorless laugh that echoed in the room. "Not what it looks like. Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife decided to turn her boss's office into a soap opera set." "Look," Steve interjected, straightening his disheveled shirt in a transparent attempt to regain some authority. "This is clearly a misunderstanding. If you two had a happy marriage, none of this would have happened." My head snapped toward Steve, my glare sharp enough to cut steel. "A misunderstanding? That's your excuse? Blame the marriage? Blame me?" Steve shrugged, his voice laced with infuriating smugness. "I'm just saying, maybe this wouldn't have happened if you'd been paying more attention to your wife's needs. People don't stray for no reason." His words were gasoline on the fire burning inside me. I crossed the room in 2 swift strides and grabbed Steve by the scruff of his shirt, slamming him against the wall with a force that rattled the framed certificates hanging beside us. Papers fluttered to the ground as I pressed closer, my knuckles whitening as I tightened my grip. "You think you're gonna lecture me about marriage? You snake!" I snarled, my voice vibrating with fury. "You don't get to wreck my life and then pretend this is my fault." "Calm down," Steve choked out, his hands feebly tugging at my iron grip. "If you don't let go, I'll call security, file a report with the police, assault charges, you hear me?" I froze for a moment, my nostrils flaring as I considered the consequences. Slowly, I released him, but not gently. He stumbled against the wall, straightening his rumpled clothes with shaking hands. "This isn't over," I said coldly, my voice as sharp as glass. Steve took a cautious step back, wary of any sudden movement. "Should be walk away while you can." I ignored him, turning to Charlotte instead. "How long?" I demanded, my voice cracking under the weight of the question. Charlotte's eyes widened. "Matthew, how long has this been going on?" I repeated, my tone steadier now but no less lethal. She hesitated, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't decide on a lie that would sound convincing. Her silence stretched, filling the room like a toxic gas. "That long," I said finally, my voice hollow. "You can't even say it out loud, can you?" Charlotte looked down at her feet, unable to meet my eyes. The confirmation I needed, and dreaded, was in her silence. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Whatever love and trust we'd built had been burned to ash, and she wasn't even brave enough to face it. I stepped back, my face hardening into a mask of resolve. "You two deserve each other," I spat, my voice laced with disgust. "Enjoy your victory, Steve. It's as hollow as the person you've chosen to share it with." I turned toward the door, ready to leave them to wallow in their guilt and shame. But as I reached the doorway, something inside me snapped. The words I'd been holding back surged to the surface. I turned back, the fury in my chest boiling over. "Now I understand why you didn't want a child, Charlotte. God forbid you upset your boss. Or maybe." I gestured around the wrecked office, my tone drenched in sarcasm. "Your rapid rise in the company has more to do with private meetings like this than any actual talent." Charlotte broke down, her sobs muffled by her hands as she slumped against the desk. A sound that once would have torn me apart now left me numb. I barely noticed her as Steve stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "Get out of here," he barked. "Enough of these family squabbles. And by the way, you broke the door to my office. Do you have any idea how much that's going to cost?" I turned to him slowly, every ounce of my contempt etched into my expression. I stepped closer, staring him down. "Shut your mouth, you idiot," I hissed, my voice low but venomous. "You're just a sleaze who thinks with what's in his pants. A disgrace to your position, but I guess it fits someone like you." He clenched his jaw, clearly seething, but I didn't wait for a response. He wasn't worth my time. I turned back toward the hallway, my steps steady, my mind made up. As I reached the doorway, I spoke without turning back. "I will never forgive betrayal," I said, my voice calm and final. "Expect the divorce papers after the holidays. Matthew." Charlotte's voice cracked as she cried out, her words trembling with desperation. "Matthew, please give me a second chance. We can talk about this later. This isn't over yet." I didn't stop. I didn't even look back. Her voice echoed after me, but it sounded small and distant. She had made her choice. Now I was making mine. The last thing I heard as I walked down the hallway, my steps ringing in the emptiness, was Steve's sneering voice. "Better a divorce than such a worthless husband." My jaw tightened, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. He wasn't worth it. Neither of them were. The sound of the party downstairs swelled as I neared the stairs, laughter and music filling the air like nothing had happened. But for me, the night, and my life as I knew it, was over. I needed time to breathe, time to figure out what the hell I was going to do next, but staying under the same roof as Charlotte was unbearable. Every second in that house felt like a fresh stab in the gut, a reminder of her betrayal. I packed my things that very night, cramming clothes and essentials into a duffel bag, and called my cousin Daniel. He didn't even hesitate when I asked if I could stay with him for a couple of months. "Come over," he said, no questions asked. By the time the holidays were over, I knew what I had to do. As I promised, I found a lawyer, a no-nonsense type recommended by a friend, and filed for divorce. Every meeting, every signature, every step of the process felt like pulling a splinter from a wound, painful but necessary. Charlotte, of course, tried everything to stop me. She called, texted, even showed up unannounced at Daniel's place once, begging me to hear her out. It was a mistake, she said over and over, her voice raw with desperation. "We can fix this, we can go back to the way things were." I told her the truth. There was no going back. "Do you even understand what you did?" I asked her one day when she cornered me on the front porch. "You didn't just cheat on me, Charlotte. You dragged me to that party, paraded me around like a fool, and then went upstairs to sleep with your boss while I was still there. How do you think anyone comes back from that?" She tried to apologize, tears streaming down her face, but I wasn't interested. Her words were empty, just like her promises of a future together. The only thing I wanted from her was a quick, clean divorce. I didn't even care about taking more than my fair share, I just wanted out. To her credit, Charlotte didn't fight me on the terms. Maybe her guilt weighed too heavily on her, or maybe she just wanted it over as much as I did. We divided everything evenly, settled things quickly in court, and moved on with our separate lives. I didn't even need to use the video I'd recorded of her and Steve. Just the memory of it was enough to keep me from ever wanting to see her again. But then came the part that almost made me laugh. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, I got an envelope in the mail. Inside was a bill from Steve, for the door I'd broken that night in his office. The gall of that man. It was like he was daring me to retaliate. I paid the bill, but not because I thought he deserved it. No, I had a better idea. If Steve thought he'd won, he had no idea what was coming. I didn't know if Charlotte and Steve were still together, and frankly I didn't care. But I did know one thing. Charlotte still worked for him. That gave me an opening, a chance to shake things up in his world. Steve was the company's golden boy, their most valuable director, and I knew taking him down wouldn't be easy. But I wasn't about to back down. If there was one thing I'd learned, it was that even the most untouchable people had weak spots. I started gathering information, piecing together every shred of insight I could find about Steve and the company he worked for. It turned out that the business was privately held, with shares divided among 6 major shareholders. Steve didn't own the company, he worked for these people. They were the real power behind the scenes. I dug deeper, using social media and corporate filings to track down 2 of them. I crafted a careful letter, 1 part accusation and 1 part plea, detailing how their hired director Steve violated not just corporate standards, but also basic moral and ethical principles. I made it clear that this wasn't just about me, that Steve's behavior reflected poorly on the entire organization. I didn't expect much. People in power rarely want to rock the boat, and I was prepared to escalate to Plan B, leaking everything to the media and turning the company's dirty laundry into a public scandal. But to my surprise, I received a reply from one of the shareholders, Lawrence Whitaker, an elderly gentleman with a reputation as a shrewd businessman and a staunch conservative. Mr. Whitaker invited me to meet him at his office, and I didn't hesitate. The day of the meeting, I arrived early, sitting in the waiting room with my nerves taut like a bowstring. When I was finally ushered in, I found myself face to face with a man who radiated quiet authority. He was in his late 70s, impeccably dressed, with a piercing gaze that made me feel like he could see straight through me. "Mr. Whitaker," I began. "Thank you for seeing me." He nodded, gesturing for me to take a seat. "Your letter caught my attention, Mr. Landon. I don't make it a habit to intervene in day-to-day business matters, but your claims are serious. If true, they concern me deeply. I'd like to hear the full story." I told him everything, from the party where Charlotte dragged me, to catching her and Steve in his office, to how Steve tried to gaslight me and shift the blame. I kept my tone steady, but as I recounted the events, I couldn't help the edge of anger that crept into my voice. When I finished, I opened my phone and played the video I'd recorded that night. Mr. Whitaker watched in silence, his expression growing darker with each passing second. When the video ended, he leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled in front of him. For a long moment he said nothing, and the quiet stretched until it felt unbearable. "Mr. Landon," he said finally, his voice calm but firm, "what you've shown me is disgraceful. Not only is Mr. Pierce's behavior morally reprehensible, but it also brings shame to the organization he represents. This company is built on trust and respect, values that Mr. Pierce has flagrantly disregarded." I nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm not asking for anything for myself, Mr. Whitaker. I just want justice. People like Steve shouldn't get away with treating others like stepping stones." He studied me for a moment longer, then gave a single decisive nod. "You'll have it. I can't promise this will be quick or easy, but I assure you, Mr. Pierce's actions will not go unanswered." Not much time passed before the company began conducting internal investigations. Lawrence Whitaker was a man of his word. Through whispers and hints from people, I learned that Steve had been subjected to a brutal dressing down by the board. His charm and bravado couldn't save him this time. They fined him a significant amount for violations of corporate conduct, then fired him in a manner that left his reputation in tatters. Word spread quickly in their industry, and Steve's name became synonymous with scandal. Charlotte didn't escape unscathed either. She resigned shortly after Steve's dismissal. Maybe it was to save face, or maybe she couldn't bear to stay in the aftermath of the mess she'd helped create. Either way, she was gone. A few weeks later, I received a call from Mr. Whitaker's office inviting me to another meeting. When I arrived, he greeted me warmly, his demeanor more relaxed than before. "Mr. Landon," he said, gesturing for me to sit, "justice has been served. I thought you deserved to know." I nodded, unsure of how to respond. There was a finality in his tone, a sense that the chapter had been closed. "Steve Pierce has been dealt with," he continued. "His misconduct has cost him dearly, not just financially, but professionally. And as for Charlotte," he hesitated briefly, his expression softening. "She too has faced the consequences of her actions." I wasn't sure what to say, but then he handed me an envelope. "This is for you," he said simply. "Consider it compensation for the suffering you endured. And don't worry, it didn't come out of the company's pocket. We made sure Mr. Pierce paid for it." I opened the envelope to find a substantial amount of money inside. It wasn't enough to erase the pain, but it was enough to help me start over with a stronger foundation. "Thank you, Mr. Whitaker," I said quietly. He nodded. "You've been through a great deal, Mr. Landon. I hope this helps you move forward. And for what it's worth, you have my sympathy. Betrayal is a wound that takes time to heal." I left his office feeling lighter, as though the weight of Steve and Charlotte's betrayal had finally been lifted from my shoulders. The money wouldn't fix everything, but it was a start. 6 months later, fate played a strange hand. I was walking through a park when I saw Charlotte. She was alone, sitting on a bench, her face turned toward the sky as if searching for something unseen. She noticed me before I could turn away, and for a moment our eyes met. I hesitated, but she stood and walked toward me. "Matthew," she said softly, stopping a few steps away. She reached out and gently took my hand, her touch tentative. "Forgive me. I did stupid things and I thought I controlled the whole world. I thought I was invincible. But you showed me the truth, showed me who I really am." Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret. Then, with a sad smile, she said goodbye and walked away. I didn't try to stop her, and she didn't look back. As I watched her go, I realized something. The divorce hadn't just changed me, it had changed her too. It seemed she had come to understand the gravity of her actions, even if it was too late to undo the damage. As for Steve, I heard through the grapevine that his career had taken a nosedive after his dramatic exit. Unable to find a position that matched his former status, he ended up working as an ordinary manager at a struggling company just to stay afloat. It seemed that Mr. Whitaker had done everything in his power to ensure Steve's name remained radioactive in the industry. For a petty womanizer like Steve, it was a fitting downfall. He'd played his games and lost, and now he was living with the consequences. I couldn't think of a more fitting end to his story, or a better reminder that justice, in the end, has its own way of balancing the scales. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel. I wish you a great mood and good luck. Now start next story. Welcome to my channel again. We hope you enjoy today's story. Lies are as bad as betrayal, aren't they? It's always a slippery slope. Tim Chase sat in a quiet bar, waiting for the sandwiches he had ordered to go. His best friend and business partner, Will Davis, was on the phone from his truck while Tim went inside to pick up lunch. It was unusual for a nice restaurant like David's Place to offer takeout lunches. The food was very tasty, and Tim always tried to have lunch there when he was in the area. Tim reflected on his day's work schedule when he heard a very familiar laugh. Curiosity prompted him to get off his stool and walk a few feet to peek into the room. At the sight, his heart sank that Tim's daughter-in-law, Dana, was sitting in a secluded corner with Matt Larson. They looked too much like two married people who were with someone other than their spouses. Tim felt bile rise in his throat as he saw Matt put his hand on Dana's shoulder and lightly stroke her left breast through her blouse. Tim's dislike of the scene didn't stop him from reaching into his pocket for his phone and opening contacts. Tim felt he had no choice. He had to clarify the situation to Dana's husband, who was sitting in the truck in the parking lot at that moment. Tim was planning to make the next call to his wife, Mandy. She would be extremely disappointed in her sister, but Tim felt it would be wrong to hide something from her that had changed her life. The truth is always better in the long run. Finding Will's number, Tim was shocked to see Mandy emerge from the ladies' room and join Dana and Matt at their table. What particularly struck him was that Matt didn't bother to remove his hand from Dana's chest. Mandy, on the other hand, seemed unfazed by such a disgusting sight. By this time, Will had answered the call. It was difficult for Tim to speak as numerous scenarios raced through his mind, none of which were appealing. He remained silent until Will demanded an explanation for why he had called. "Will, get your ass over here. There's some shit going down that you need to see," Tim replied before hanging up. Less than half a minute later, Will walked through the door and immediately found him waiting for him. Will gave Tim a questioning look, to which Tim simply tilted his head towards the dining area. Will shifted his gaze from Tim to the dining area and then back to Tim. Will looked bewildered. Both men jumped when Dana's familiar laughter suddenly echoed through the dining room. Will tilted his head back and scrutinized the room more carefully. Tim understood when Will's gaze finally found Dana. A frown appeared on his face, and he began to stride quickly across the room. Tim still held the phone in his hand, hurrying to catch up with his friend. He switched to video mode just before Will entered the restaurant. Will moved with astonishing stealth for someone consumed by rage. He reached Matt Larson before everyone at the table realized that Dana's husband was in the room. Will's fist landed forcefully in the center of Matt's lecherous grin. The impact sent Matt tumbling backward, breaking the chair he was sitting on and hitting the tiled floor. In a reflex action, Matt grabbed Dana's left breast as he began his short journey. Dana screamed as most of her blouse was torn away from her chest, and the left cup of her bra was pulled almost to her shoulder, exposing her white breast that she had recently hidden. The right breast was also exposed as the cup holding it was pushed several centimeters up Dana's chest. Will looked down at the semi-conscious Matt Larson and deliberately spat in the lying man's face. "Fuck you, Matt Larson. Next time I see you, I'll send you to the hospital, you pathetic bastard. Will, what are you doing here? Dana asked, puzzled. It wasn't as it might seem. Matt was just a friend. That's all. That's it? That's all you have to say? Will replied with an unhappy laugh. It was just lunch. Does he just always play with your tits while he eats lunch? They're still hanging out in plain sight now, by the way. Dana almost gasped at the sight of her bare breasts. She quickly pulled her bra back into place as her face turned bright red. It had been an accident. Matt tried to grab onto something to keep from falling on his back. There was nothing to it. Your behavior was irrational and dangerous. I never realized how easily and often you lie, Dana, Will replied before turning to Tim. You saw Matt holding Dana's tit, didn't you, Tim? Yes, I saw it and videotaped it, Tim replied as he continued to take notes. I'll send you a copy when this shit show is over. Tim, you're not going to do anything like that, Mandy declared, finally finding her voice. You're not going to interfere with Dana's personal life. She needs to work things out with Will. Your meddling won't help. Delete that video. Good thing I'm still recording this crap. Tim snorted. You told me you and Dana were going to outlets for Christmas presents. Yet here you are, 100 miles from outlets, helping your slutty sister hook up with some worthless prick. And now you're saying my behavior is inappropriate? You can't even believe this bullshit yourself. I'm watching this in real time, and it's still hard for me to believe. That's why my video will be so important. I might forget some details of this crap, but the video will be a useful reminder. Did you just call me a trash? Dana almost growled. You're lucky Will didn't punch you in the face. You're insulting me and I won't forget it. Damn. Looks like you've already forgotten about your lover, Tim replied, nodding towards the body slowly writhing on the floor. He's trying to sit up, and there's blood everywhere. Looks like he needs the traitor's help. Will, let's grab lunch and get out of here while we still can. If any of these nosy assholes try to twist the story to make us look worse than we are, I'll have video evidence to set things straight. Mandy was still processing her husband's comments when the two men turned to leave. Tim, I haven't done anything wrong. There's no reason to be mad at me. You should stay and help us take care of Matt. He needs to see a doctor. Looks like he has a broken nose. I'd bet money on that. Tim chuckled, turning to Mandy. Will was on fire when he punched that dumbass in the face. I wouldn't piss on Larson even if he were on fire. You both messed up our marriages and God knows what else. I still remember the wise words my father often told me. Can I take a guess? Will asked. Something that's been fucked can't be unfucked? Exactly. Let's grab lunch and have some beers. We can get used to this well-fucked feeling since we'll be enjoying it for a while, Tim replied, making air quotes. Tim glanced over his shoulder once more as they left the room. Dana and Mandy were trying to help Matt settle into another chair that wasn't broken, while the waitress watched them with her mouth open. Tim picked up their lunch order and drove to a gas station, where he bought a pack of beer. After finishing a can, he drove to a cheap motel and checked in. Throughout all this, Will remained silent. Come on, buddy, Tim chided him. We need to eat and wrap this up. We always think better after a drink. So let's go to the room and start thinking. After pulling into her garage, Mandy noticed that Tim's car was not in the driveway. Her 17-year-old son, Trent, was at home after school playing video games. Have you happened to hear anything from your father? Mandy asked, trying to keep a neutral tone. Yeah, he called me recently, Trent replied. And what did he say? Mandy pressed on. Same old when parents divorce. That you both still love Beth and me, but can't live together anymore. That you and Aunt Dana are liars and don't respect Dad and Uncle Will. And so on. Did Tim say that? Did he tell you we're getting divorced? Was he serious? Mandy inquired. Well, he sounded like he was drunk out of his mind, but he seemed serious. You told Dad, Beth, and me over breakfast that you were going shopping at outlets with Aunt Dana today. But you actually went north instead of south and ended up at David's place with Matt Larson. Dad said that Larson was already all over Aunt Dana when they and Uncle Will found you in the restaurant. No one noticed Will until he punched that asshole in the nose with a right hook, knocking him onto his back. Too bad I didn't see it. Wait a minute. Dad said he'll send me the video later so I can watch it, Trent added. I told your dad I didn't want to see that video. Furthermore, I said I wanted it deleted. Mandy protested. Well, in Dad's defense, you also told him you were going shopping today. He made the mistake of believing you. Now that he knows you have a shaky relationship with the truth, he might think you lied about wanting the video deleted. How will he know when you're telling him the truth? Trent argued. I don't need your wise comments, Mandy snapped. I told a white lie to prevent anyone from getting hurt. Otherwise, I always tell the truth. Did you know Aunt Dana is sleeping with Larson? Trent quickly asked. Who said she's sleeping with Larson? They're just friends, Mandy stated. Is this your truthful story and are you going to stick to it? Trent asked. Then I don't understand how you can stay married. It's amazing you've held on for so long. Are you calling me a liar? Mandy demanded an answer from her son. Not in those words, Trent replied. Dad mentioned that Dana called Uncle Will and confessed that she had slept with Larson several times and that you helped her hide it. Damn it. Why didn't she call and tell me she confessed to Will? I was trying to cover for her when she had already spilled everything. There goes your always telling the truth. Trent sarcastically remarked. Dad said I'll be living here with you until I leave for college next fall. Beth isn't too happy about her prospects, but she's still young. She'll manage. Has your father already made all the decisions? Did he make those decisions while half drunk and without consulting me? Mandy was confident that she would be able to convince Tim that she had lied only to help her sister. She had never cheated on Tim and had no intention of doing so. It was all a misunderstanding. But the fact remained that she continued to lie to protect her sister even after Dana confessed to Will. That wasn't good. Tim was an exceptionally honest person, fair and straightforward in his dealings with others. He often told Mandy how much he disliked liars and the damage their lies caused. Trent was very much like his father. He immediately broke up with his last girlfriend when he found out she had lied to him about why she canceled their date. The girl called Trent several times and asked for forgiveness, but each time she was refused. Now Tim was talking about divorce, and according to Trent, he was quite serious about it. How could one small mistake turn into such a big problem? Why was Tim so inflexible? He was willing to do anything for Will. Mandy was sure that Tim would lie to help Will save his marriage. Why couldn't Mandy help her sister in the same way? What was she supposed to do when her sister asked for her help? The more Mandy thought about it, the more convinced she became that she hadn't done anything wrong, or at least nothing that Tim wouldn't do for Will. It was Tim who was the hypocrite, plain and simple. Mandy decided to prepare dinner only for the kids and herself. If Tim came home and wanted something to eat, he would have to cook it himself. She was determined to weather the storm and even make Tim apologize to her for his behavior. Beth entered the kitchen as Mandy set the food on the table. Mandy could easily tell that Beth wasn't happy. I think I'll tell the judge that I want to live with Dad, Beth said. Helping Aunt Dana cheat on Uncle Will is really low, Mom. Will is a very good guy. He and Dad are the best friends they can be. I can't understand what you and Aunt Dana were thinking. I wasn't caught cheating on your father, Mandy snapped. I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I couldn't tell Tim about Dana's guy. He would have told Will as soon as he found out. Interesting choice of words, Mom. You said you weren't caught cheating on Dad. You didn't say you never cheated. Just that you were never caught, Beth retorted. I never cheated on Tim. Mandy angrily replied. All I did was cover for Dana a few times. She's my sister, and I'll always be on her side. Blood is thicker than water. Do you think you were helping Aunt Dana by covering up her cheating on Uncle Will? Beth asked with obvious skepticism. And how did that work out for both of you? Dad and Uncle will now know that both of you are liars, and at least one of you is a cheater. Since you've shown your willingness to lie, how does Dad know you didn't cheat on him? Tim knows I wouldn't cheat on him, and I've never lied about anything. Except for Dana's cheating. He would do the same for Will. Maybe he already has. Who knows? Tim can't play the I'm holier than thou card with me, Mandy declared. As far as we know, both your father and uncle could have had flings. Beth shook her head slowly in disbelief. Have you completely lost it? We know for sure that Dad and Uncle will have never cheated. How do we know? You ask. because they have never, and I mean never, lied to anyone or deceived anyone. I would bet my life that Dad has never deceived you. It's sad that now I wouldn't dare to bet on your loyalty. Now it was Mandy's turn to be stunned. You think I could cheat on your father? You've decided that just because I tried to protect my only sister, I must be a cheater? I didn't say that, Mom. I'm saying I'm not as sure about your loyalty as I am about Dad's. I didn't feel this way even this morning when you told us all that you were going to outlets with Aunt Dana. But today you've lost some of my trust. And that's your fault. Before Mandy could reply, her mobile phone rang. It's Dana. I have to take this call, but we'll continue the conversation later. I heard that you confessed to Will and made me look like a fool. I was still denying your affair when Trent told me you'd already admitted to cheating. Guilty as charged, sis. Lately, I've made a lot of wrong decisions. I don't know why you didn't make me stop seeing Matt when you found out about us. That would have bothered me then, but I wouldn't have had to go through the mess I got into today. Hold on a moment, protested Mandy. It was you who begged me to help keep your affair a secret. I was just trying to be a good sister and spare you from pain. You didn't do a very good job of that, did you? Replied Dana. You should have made me stop as soon as you found out. I was lucky that Will took me back. Wait, you said Will took you back? He forgave you? Asked Mandy. How did you convince him? He looked very angry at the restaurant. You won't believe it. I called Will and confessed everything. I convinced him that I told him the absolute truth. You know how Will and Tim feel about lies. I was sure he was going to divorce me, but I also knew that my only chance was to be completely honest and very repentant. Will told me that he had long conversations with Tim about fidelity, honesty, forgiveness, and all kinds of partnership issues. Will told me that Tim noted that we, Will and I, are not only spouses but partners. I can't believe that a few simple cliches allowed Will to forgive you, Mandy said. There must be something more. You guessed it, sis. Will told me that 2 years ago, when they were in Harrisburg for a 2-day lawn and garden expo, he met a woman who seemed interested in him. Tim went to check out equipment, while Will sat at the bar chatting with this young, attractive woman. At least, that's how Will described her. He sent Tim a message and asked him not to come back to their room for a couple of hours. As he had met someone, Dana continued. Will said that by the time he settled the bill at the bar, Tim was right there in front of him, angrier than he had ever seen him. Tim told Will that he would have to fight and beat him before Will could bring that woman back to their room. Then Tim told Will that even if he managed to take Tim down, he would still call and tell me what a liar Will was. Then he would tell our kids, you, our parents, and anyone else who might be interested. I've never heard of this, Dana. Tim never mentioned anything about it, Mandy admitted. That's because my damn fool of a husband came to his senses. He was damn furious at Tim for a few days. He said it was uncomfortable coming back. They didn't talk to each other on the way home. It seems they've come to terms with it, observed Mandy. They still behave like brothers. It's because we'll gradually realize that Tim did him a huge favor by preventing him from ruining his marriage and family. Dana explained. Will even told Tim that he was ashamed of himself and didn't deserve a friend like Tim. He even offered to dissolve their partnership if Tim didn't want to work with him after that. And you know what your tough-hearted husband told Will? He told Will that he loves him like a brother. He would sooner destroy their friendship than see Will cause pain to me and the kids. Tim told Will that he knows infidelity will eventually destroy him, just as if I had cheated on him. Wow, Dana, that's quite heavy. It's like it makes your infidelity even worse, doesn't it? Mandy asked. You think so, don't you? Dana said. Luckily, Will seems more forgiving because he almost went off track. Don't take offense, sis, but will notice that I don't have as strong a support system as he does. That's the difference. Mandy didn't know how to respond to Dana's remark. She had hidden her sister's infidelity. She had gone as far as lying to her family to protect Dana. And now that same sister tells her that Tim is the best friend because he won't let Will get into the mess she allowed in relation to Dana. Is Will home right now? Mandy asked. To change the subject a bit, do you think I should expect him to show up soon? Will told me that Tim is very drunk. They had to persuade the motel clerk where they stayed to get them a second crate of beer after they finished the first. At least they knew it was better not to drive, Dana replied. They went to a motel instead of coming home? It seems like Tim is just as upset about this situation as Will. I need to talk to him and explain everything, Mandy stated. Good luck with that, Dana said skeptically. Will told me that Tim is more upset than he is. Tim never thought you would look him in the eye and lie. Now he's doubting your loyalty and what you're putting into your marriage. Will said Tim feels like he's married to a completely different woman. He doesn't know who you are now. That's just silly. You know I never cheated on Tim. I also advised you to stay away from Matt. All I did was try to protect you and prevent Will from finding out and divorcing you, Mandy reasoned. Turns out that was not what was needed at all. A proper assessment of the situation is 20 out of 20. Now I realize I was a damn fool. And you're not much better, Dana replied. You should have kicked my ass and threatened to tell Will what a crap I was. That would have stopped me from making such a stupid decision. You helped me deceive and it didn't benefit me at all. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Tim and Will caught us in the restaurant where you were sitting next to your lover with his hand on your chest. Will hit your guy and Tim is very upset because of me. Will forgave you, but Tim is still angry and talking about divorce because I lied to protect you. And now you're telling me I shouldn't have tried to help you keep your secret. And I'm not as good a friend as Tim, Mandy said. That sounds pretty accurate, sis. You know what Tim is like. And yet you risked your marriage trying to help me deceive mine. You should have known Tim would be furious when he found out. He's a damn Boy Scout. For goodness sake, Dana replied. Mandy fell silent, contemplating her situation. How could she have been so foolish? In her world, there was one thing she could always count on. Tim's loyalty to his family. Of course, he was angry when he found out she had lied to him. That was not surprising. He never gave her reason to think he would tolerate or forgive her for lying. Mandy realized that what she valued most in life was being able to trust her husband and depend on him and knowing that he felt the same way about her. That's how a marriage should be. It was built on honesty and trust. And she had foolishly destroyed them. Dana, I need to work on saving my marriage, Mandy said grimly. You're right about me messing everything up. I knew it was wrong, and yet I still did it. I would like to blame you, but the truth is all my problems are on my conscience. I lack the courage and conviction to demand that you stay away from that jerk. Matt, now I'm paying the price for it. I need to leave. I need to figure out how to make Tim forgive me. So, Mom, what are you going to do? Beth asked. Aunt Dana seems to have come out of this mess smelling like roses. But you've really gotten yourself into deep trouble. You know Dad better than Trent and I do. And we both know it's better not to lie to him. You're right, Beth. The only thing helping me right now is that your dad has always been able to forgive me in the past. He has a big heart and family is the center of his life, Mandy declared. All I can think about is pleading with Tim to forgive me. I was completely in the wrong. It will never happen again if he can forgive me this time. That might work, Mom. Especially if you wear your yellow sundress that shows off your figure so well while you're pleading with him. Dad practically melts when he sees you in it. Melts? Is that what you call it? Mandy asked with a smile. When I talk to Mom, I call it melting. Beth replied with a smile. When I see guys looking at me or my friends the way Dad looks at you, I call it standing up. Do you think Tim still looks at me like that after all these years? Now you're fishing for compliments, Mom. You know how Dad feels about you. Most of the time, he's like putty in your hands. He'll do anything for you as long as you treat him the same way. Tim pulled up to his house afternoon. He was subdued and slightly hungover. He sighed deeply and headed for the front door. He had been contemplating his situation for a long time. Mandy couldn't paint him as the bad guy. He had a divorce form with him that he found online and printed out. Mandy could threaten him all day long, but it wouldn't change anything. She lied to him and their kids. There was no way to put a shine on all of this. Beth greeted him as he crossed the threshold of the house. She took his jacket and headed for the closet. How was your day, Dad? You look a little tired. Are you okay? Not very good, dear, Tim replied. I'm not sure what you've heard, but I suspect it was untrue. I need to talk to your mom alone. We're, so to speak, at a crossroads. Yes, I've heard everything, Beth replied. Those papers you're carrying look terribly serious. Mom asked me to take you to the living room and ask you to sit in the chair while I bring you a cold beer. Trent is already there, and I'll be back with your drink soon. I don't need a drink, Tim protested. I also don't need an audience. I just need to talk to your mother, and you kids better not hear what I have to say to her. You're mistaken, Dad. Here's your beer, Beth said to her father. Mom wants Trent and me to witness everything that's happening. She was very insistent. Why? Does she think I'll hurt her or something like that? You both know I would never harm your mother. It would be better if both of you went to friends or somewhere else. I want our children to hear what I have to say. Tim, they will stay here and listen to everything. They need to know the problems that misunderstood loyalty and stubbornness lead to, declared Mandy as she entered the room. Do you think I'm stubborn? Do you think that being faithful to my friendship with Will and doing the right thing have caused our problems? Demanded Tim for an answer. Maybe these divorce papers I printed out will show you how serious I am. I didn't want the kids to hear about this, but it's you, the stubborn one. Give them to me and I'll sign them right now, promised Mandy. I believe you'll be fair if divorce becomes our only way out. I wish I could offer another solution if I could. You should read through them and take them to a lawyer. I was very angry when I filled them out, and they might be a bit one-sided, admitted Tim. It doesn't matter what's written on some piece of paper, Tim. I know you. You will never be unfair to me. I'm not worried about any agreement. I wanted Trent and Bet to be here because they deserve apologies almost as much as you do, Mandy explained, approaching Tim's chair and kneeling in front of him. I was wrong. Terribly wrong, Tim. I lied to the three of you over breakfast yesterday morning, and a few other times that I can remember. I had a false impression that I was helping my sister. I was mistaken. Now I understand that. I worsened the situation by not telling the truth and not standing up for what I knew was right. I wish I could turn back time, but I can't. I have to live with my mistake. Tim's grim expression slowly turned to surprise as he listened to Mandy kneeling before him. Even in such a distressed state, he noticed that Mandy was wearing the yellow sundress he liked so much. As she leaned forward, Mandy's neckline deepened even more. He couldn't look away. Even after almost 20 years of marriage with the woman standing before him, she still remained the woman he cherished. I apologize to you, Tim. The kids told me earlier that if you see fit to forgive me, then they will too. I was wrong. I know that. I will do everything possible to never disappoint you in this way again. I promise you my love and respect. I will accept any decision you make without complaint, Mandy added. I got a little lost, but now I'm back on track. Can you forgive me and teach yourself to love me again? Tim looked at Mandy for a long time before responding. You really hurt me, Mandy. I never thought you were capable of lying to me, especially so convincingly. I must be able to trust you, or I can't stay with you. That's a fact. My marriage must be based on respect and complete trust. There's no middle ground here. You can't be reliable only most of the time. That doesn't work for me. That's why my foolish attempts to support Dana were so painful for you. And in fact, for me too, Mandy sincerely replied. I'm afraid I lack your moral compass, Tim. I think I'm pretty good, but I understand that I need to be better. If we look at this logically, there should be no problem in telling you the truth every time I talk to you. I want you to give me a chance to reach that goal. I truly love my husband and my children, and I always will. Empty talk is a cheap pleasure, Mandy. You were put in a difficult situation and you gave in. You took the path that seemed easier to you, and now it turns out that it's not. How can I trust you after this recent fiasco? I guess you feel like I'm asking you to believe a seasoned liar, Tim. Frankly, that's a bit challenging. I'm asking you to understand that I'm not as principled as you are, but that doesn't mean I'm unfaithful or disrespectful. I'm just a woman in love with a very tough, moral man. Dad, look at Mom, Beth interjected. Really look at her. I think you see what Trin and I see. Mom wants to stay married and be a part of this family. Trin and I want that too. Doesn't she look stunning in this dress? She's your wife and she's beautiful. Maybe you need to have a heart-to-heart with her right now? Tim looked away from Mandy to see the smiling faces of his two children. If Will could forgive Dana, couldn't he give Mandy another chance? He turned back to Mandy. She nervously ran her tongue over her lips. Tim noticed that the top two buttons on her dress were undone, exposing a significant portion of her neckline. "Do you think I'm that simple?" Tim asked his family. "Mandy has a long way to go before I fully trust her again." "You're not simple, Dad, but you're a man. Mom practically told you that anything is possible if you accept her apologies," Trent remarked. "I think the reward is worth the risk, don't you?" Tim smiled at Trent's comment. He looked directly at his wife and asked, "Is that what you're telling me, Mandy?" Tim and the two children couldn't help but laugh when Mandy nodded, blushing at the same time.